Well, happy Friday, everyone. I'm Nick Slavik. I'm the proprietor of the Nick Slavik Painting and Restoration Company. I'm also the host of this show, Ask a Painter Live. It's a weekly live Facebook show where I use my over 2 decades of experience as a painter, craftsman, wallpaper hanger, color consultationist, historic restorationist, furniture restorationist to answer all of your questions that you have about painting and related items. You can ask your questions anytime during the live feed. Just type them down here. I'll get to them at the end. If you have questions for me during the week, go to Ask a Painter, on my Ask a Painter page on Facebook. You can leave a separate thread there, ask your question, leave a comment. Always include pictures. Pictures are always the best when we do that sort of thing. So, on with the show today. A couple things coming up. The cottage cabin, the hashtag cottage cabin project that I started. It's for a client of mine who is building a cabin from the ground up in northern Minnesota. It's styled after probably a 20 or a 30s sort of cottage like that. Everything as far as, cutting down their own trees to split the shingles, to then clad the outside, to making their own trim for the inside, flooring as well. I started that project. Like I said, it's new construction, so it's all new drywall. I went up there, I got everything primed, did a little fishing. And then I'm just sort of waiting for flooring and trim to get put in. So as soon as I get back up there, I'll give you more updates on that. If you want to see progress so far on that project, hashtag cottage cabin on either Instagram or Facebook, and you can get that. PDC Expo. The Painting and Decorating Contractors of America is having their yearly expo at the end of February. I'll be flying down to San Diego and giving a master's class on cabinet finishing, and there will be a debate, probably the highlight, at least last year it was, the highlight of the expo was the big debate they have. They pit two teams of painters against each other. They give them a topic and we research them, we come up with arguments, and then we debate each other. So it's going to be a phenomenal thing again. It was a very, very interesting sort of exercise last year. So let's see what else we got here. Ask a Painter's got a new home. Again, the Facebook site, Ask a Painter Live. Today we're going to get some questions about colors. I've been getting a lot of questions about colors this last week. We're going to talk about some brushing and rolling techniques. We're going to talk about plaster cracks. We're also going to talk about ghosting from candles and the things, how that can affect your house. So, okay. Oh yeah, also hello to all the Brazilian painters, the Pinturas down there in Brazil. I've been receiving a lot of messages back and forth. Thank you guys for watching down there. And whatever you guys as pros would like to see in your neck of the woods, definitely let me know. Or if you have some interesting things going on there that is specific to you, send some pictures, do some comments, something. We're always interested in that thing. So, okay, first couple questions here. Josh Erickson, a friend of mine, commented on Instagram. Always love your color choices. I'd love to hear you speak a bit about color palette selection. The first Ask a Painter I ever did, Ask a Painter number 1, is about a 45-minute treatise on my theory about color, some of the things that are going on now, how I approach a color consultation. There is a joint effort that I did through Ask a Painter with the PDCA. We did a live feed of me actually giving an estimate and a color consultation to an actual homeowner live, and that's a real interesting thing too. So there's those two things if you want to reference, sort of the basics of it. Josh, I will get to your question in a second. I got about four different questions this week about particular grays. People have been seeing a lot of the stuff I've been doing recently, and they're very curious about the colors I'm using, the colors that my clients are choosing, and how it all works together. So another question I got, Christy Howen, any chance you have a lighter gray that you can recommend? My trim is white and cabinets are dark brown. So I picked that particular question because that's prototypical of what's happening in the construction industry right now. Most model homes you see now, when you walk in, are going to have a combination of some kind of dark flooring, maybe some dark woodwork accents scattered in, maybe a little bit of salvage wood on a higher end home. They're going to have white or off-white trim and cabinets, and then they're going to have gray or taupe walls. And that's really, really prototypical. And as you can see here, I mean, I'm in a house that sort of does that too. So this is very of the times. Not only is it of the times, it's sort of a classic look too. I mean, before woodwork was ever stained and varnished natural, it was painted. Natural wood way back. was not a sign of high living. It was, people wanted paint, and at a time when paint was scarce or you had to make it yourself, painting the outside of your home or painting things in your home was actually a sign that you were doing fairly well. So it is a classic sort of timeless look. It's a very good look too, and it's neutral. You can kind of decorate around it anytime you want. So, Josh, as far as color palette selection, when I do a color consultation with people, color is actually a lot easier than most people think, and I know that I'm biased because I deal with it every day, but honestly, if I took one of these things here, I could pull out about 20 cards, and almost every one of my clients would naturally just come upon those cards all by themselves. People don't stray too often into the odd stuff, because in every fan deck, you have this whole section of pastels where if you do a kid's room once or twice a year, you might use them, but otherwise they're really not used at all. So it's very daunting to look at a fan deck like this and think, well, there's 10,000 colors, where am I going to start? Well, really, where I start with clients is most of my clients have pets, have families, have some sort of small creatures that live in their house that could possibly ruin the paint. So what I normally start them off with is in open floor plans house, you usually have a kitchen, a dining room, and a living room that are somehow brought together a little bit, or at least share a common space. You have a stairwell, a hallway, things like that. Most people do not paint those orange, red, yellow, purple, green, things like that. They normally go for neutral colors. So when we're talking about neutral colors, to me there's two main neutral colors. You have brown or you have gray. And people's personality usually, parts them, and, maybe a third of my clients nowadays are tan clients, and maybe 70% are gray clients. And that switches over time. I mean, 5 years ago, you didn't paint a lot of inside houses grays or taupes like this. I mean, everything was warm tans, gold tans, reds, things like that. So the general color palette has taken a cool tone lately. So after I kind of figure out, you can see how the people have decorated their house now. Most people have color chips that they've already got, so they'll show you things that they like, and you can immediately tell. Most people have actually started looking at color before I get there. So when they have all their colors laid out, most of the time there's either a whole bunch of tans or a whole bunch of grays. There's usually never a mix. Most of my people, I can't remember the last time I ran into somebody who just could not decide between, grays and tans. So what I normally do is figure out if I'm working with a tan couple or if I'm working with a gray couple. And then based on that, if we're working tans, we can have red tans or we can have gold tans. When we're working with grays, how deep do you want it? Do you want true steel, or do you want to start edging towards the middle ground? The kind of line of demarcation is taupes. Taupe, at least in the way I describe it to my clients, is a half gray, half brown color. So you have your browns and your tans, you have your grays, and right down the middle where they mix, sort of where the rivers meet the oceans, is going to be taupe. A lot of people right now are sort of in the taupe, region. We've come out of 20 to 30 years of tan and gold tan sort of being the standard by which, we paint the neutral areas of our house. We've sort of moved into the grayer, cooler tones, but still not many people I work for pick true steel grays. And even the room that I'm in now, it's a fairly gray color, but in the light, I would almost consider it a taupe, the halfway in between. So Josh, when I meet a client, I try to get them to consider neutral colors, not only because you can decorate around them, they show less wear and tear just by their nature, by being closer to the color of dirt or ground or earth. You're going to see less wear and tear. So I try to get them to at least do stairwells, do hallways, areas where there's lots of traffic, entryways, mudrooms, and it's not sitting rooms, it's not kitchens, it's not the area where you relax in your house. If you can do a neutral color in there, that's a great thing. That's a good use of neutral colors there. Now, it doesn't have to be a boring neutral color. It can be a very deep neutral color. As far as on the line of taupes and grays here, where the top color would be considered a very, very light color. Most people pick something around here for their neutral colors in their house, but certainly if you go all the way down to the bottom with a very, very deep color, because something I've noticed over the years is if you pick a neutral color but bring it to its farthest extent, where a tan would become a chocolate brown, or a gray would become a deep sort of iron, bronzish, sort of grayish, almost approaching black color. You can go very, very deep with those colors, and people are not averse to them as much as they are a purple or a red that deep, because they are neutral. So you can actually get away with a little more depth if you pick neutral colors. If you're worried about your house maybe too bold, too daring, that the red or something may be a little too bold when it's deep, you can go with a neutral color. And because it's neutral a little bit, you can get away with a darker color. Now, then I start entering into, most people don't want their color all one tan, all one gray. So we kind of want to sprinkle in an accent thing here. Maybe we want to segment off rooms or the master suite, do some other colors in there. And you can kind of tell how the client's talking, which way they want to go with it. Some people aren't satisfied with, the pure accent stuff. So then you have to bring in decorative finishing, wallpapering, stripes, other sort of decorative techniques that you can do. And those are good to do, but you need to cross all the first bridges before you get to that stuff. If you jump right to wallpaper with a client, you're missing over all the useful, inexpensive, low-hanging fruit that you could do to make their house better. Instead of just jumping right to a $180 roll of glass bead or fur wallpaper. So, Josh, I hope that helps out. That's sort of my general stuff for semi-modern homes when I do color consultations. It's tough because when I do, I give all my clients, anybody who has me do work for them, I do free color consultations, not only to help them, but it really makes my life easier. The last thing I want to do is paint a house and have the color not be right, because all the work will be good and it'll be of a very high quality, but if the color's not right, you might as well not have done anything. So I found that with my system of sort of, my color consultation, coaching them through, maybe they do some samples, we talk about it, 99% effective, that the people will really be pleased with their colors. So when I give my general advice, I have to base that color advice on 85% of my clients would love exactly what I'm telling you. And through our conversations, I have to figure out if that person is the 85% that wants to maybe dabble in some interesting stuff, or, like me, is probably in the outlier, the 15% that wants something nobody else has and is willing to take a little risk on things. And naturally I do that only because I see so much. I have a comfort level with certain things. I mean, I have an orange house. The outside of my house is orange, and since I was in high school, I've been wanting to paint an orange house. I thought it'd be a really interesting thing. Nobody would let me do it, so I kind of had to wait till I got my own to do it. And I love the color, and sadly, I will probably never change the outside of my house color, as much as I love variety. But it is such a good color. It's so fitting. I find myself in that 15%, and I always want to figure out if my clients are that too, so that I can scratch that itch for them. Because I don't want everybody to have a neutral house if what they're looking for is something daring or bold or interesting or just different. So, okay. And then Christy had asked, any chance you have a lighter gray you can recommend? Trim is white, cabinets are dark. Okay. Some of my favorite light grays that I've been using now, I find myself using a lot of Benjamin Moore colors. I'm not brand specific, and as a matter of fact, I use a Valspar wall paint. But I find myself using a lot of Benjamin Moore colors. Most of the home magazines that I subscribe to have Benjamin Moore colors listed in them. More and more, these home magazines are getting it, and they're actually listing all the paint colors that they use, in certain photos, and that's a very helpful thing. So I use a lot of Benjamin Moore colors. I match them into other things other coatings that I like to do. Some of my Benjamin Moore colors that I've been using recently here, like I said, I find my clients a lot in the sort of taupe region. So I'm trying to organize these in order from maybe taupiest to grayest. A lot of what I've seen, not only in other people's houses, but in houses that I've done, is, you get a lot of Cabot Trail, the card with Cabot Trail here. You have Baja Dunes, Cabot Trail, Rustic Taupe. These are about the brownest of the taupes that I would use in the continuum between tan, taupe, and gray. These are probably halfway between taupe and tan. So if you're looking for something that's a very cool kind of muddy brown, this would probably be something for you. It's still on the cool tone, but it will not depart so far from that warm tan that we've sort of been used to. The next card here, this is from Benjamin Moore, again, the classic deck. Desert Light, Hazelwood, Creek Bed, things like this. As a matter of fact, I'll be using Creek Bed on this particular house and in an accent wall. It's a very, very good color. Again, cool, kind of taupey, interesting color, something like that. And as you get into more the pure taupes and then sort of the grayish taupes, we have probably the two most popular cards in the Benjamin Moore fan deck now are the one with Himalayan Trek, Plymouth Rock, Waynesboro Taupe. Any of you pros out there, if you've been doing this more than 6 months, you'll probably come across these colors. Very, very good colors, and they're used for a reason. The tone is just right with these things. They're not tan, they're not gray, maybe slight bit towards gray, but they're just beautiful, beautiful taupes. Go with anything you have. And then the more gray selection, we're still in kind of the taupe region, but you have Cumulus Cloud, La Paloma Gray, and then River Reflections. So, of those things there in the Benjamin Moore deck, Christy, these are very, very good colors, and certainly you can't forget Revere Pewter. Revere Pewter is such a beautiful color. The last kitchen that I did, this is Revere Pewter right here, this nice kind of wispy light gray. The last kitchen I did, the homeowner let me pick the color for the ceiling, walls, and cabinets, and I sort of did my thing. The Revere Pewter was the wall color I picked, and as a matter of fact, I could show you the color I paired it with for them. One of my all-time favorite colors from any company, it would be the Navajo White and then the Revere Pewter. A great combination, and in this light, Navajo looks maybe a little bit gold or a little bit yellow, but it is one of the most beautiful, softest off-whites, but an interesting off-white that you can get, and that is a phenomenal combination. Those two play really well together. I pulled out a Sherwin-Williams deck here. I'm actually using some of these colors on this house in another area. We started off today with knitting needles here, Sherwin-Williams knitting needles. Number on that is 7672. It's a color I have not used before, actually. The client picked it after doing a whole bunch of samples, and it's a beautiful color. We have most of the main floor painted already, and it's just a phenomenal, phenomenal color. It's probably a titch on the grayer side compared to most taupes and stuff like that, but it is I'm very pleased with the color. They have a white ceiling, they have dark floors, they have white woodwork. Beautiful, beautiful color, and I'm very pleased with that color. So I'll be adding that to sort of my go-to list here too. And then pewter cast is one we'll be doing as an accent in this house too. So knitting needles and pewter cast, and yeah, phenomenal, phenomenal color. So Christy, I hope that helps out. You could check those out. The good thing about colors nowadays is that I always urge my clients, if they're having troubles, Benjamin Moore colors are so popular that you can do a Google image search. You just say kitchen Revere Pewter, and you'll get 10,000 images of actual kitchens painted Revere Pewter. So it's phenomenal. I mean, there's all these paint companies that have the programs where you can take a picture of your house, manipulate it, but it's still not as accurate as seeing an actual kitchen. And the internet, it's quick, it's free, it's easy, and you can see actual colors in houses. You can look for them in incandescent lighting, you can look for them in natural light. Phenomenal, phenomenal thing. So, Josh and Christy, I hope that helps. Frank Bowen, my wife's grandmother, actually wrote me, I learned that when painting with a roller, you should make a series of W's, which give you the best coverage. How about when using a brush? What I do with my apprentices, today I have 3 of them with me. We break up usually into teams of 2. So we have 1 cutter and 1 roller. So we have one guy with a 2.5-inch brush, and he cuts the wall around the outside, and the guy with the roller will then follow behind him. Our goal is to keep a wet edge. If you can still roll the wall while the cutting is still wet, you will get a very, very even paint job. Most homeowners, where they where they make the biggest mistake is they hate the cutting in part. They hate the brushing part. So what they'll do is they'll brush a whole room twice, and they say, well, hey, I got that over with, I'm going to roll the middle now. Well, what happens is when you brush into a corner, like this corner right here, you brush this corner, you roll over here, or you brush here, You do the whole room, a couple hours later you come back, you put another coat over here, that's fine, but then when you come back to roll it, you're overlapping a little bit. Sorry about that phone call. So you have your cut, double cut here, so you got 2 coats of your brushed paint. You bring your roller back over with another 2. Near the corner you have 2 coats. In the middle of the wall you have 2 coats. Where they overlap, you're actually going to picture frame your room. You have 4 coats of paint. If you're using a very, very high quality paint, it may not make a difference. But if you're using some cheap stuff, if you're using some Dutch Boy or some Bear or some other stuff like that, you could very well make a shiny ring called picture framing around your room. So when I work with my apprentices, the most senior guy with the most experience, he's going to be the cutter. The guy behind him is going to be a roller. And yes, Frank, I'd love to hear from you. Yes, the sort of W thing is good, and I do a modified version of that. What I do, we have super good gear. We got the Worcester frames, super sturdy frames. You can push on those as hard as you want. You'd be hard pressed to bend them. Super deep trays or buckets. Never a 5-gallon bucket, but the Worcester square buckets. We got some good interlock poles, super stiff poles with hexagon handles, so you can put a lot of pressure in here. We use the Worcester Pro Doozy roller covers, usually a 1/2 inch FTP for today's paint. That's their newest roller cover. And so the guy is cutting, and before that guy's done cutting that wall, the apprentice, one of my apprentices right behind me, and when you see a wall like this, you have a 9-inch roller. So what I usually tell the guys is when the roller is full of paint, you should be able to get 1, 2, 3 widths out of a roller. So what we do, like if you consider, this wall right here, I would have cut it. The apprentices start, you do not start rolling in the corner. You actually go 1 roller width out into the middle. You lay down your stripe of paint from ceiling to floor. You kind of roll it back and forth, in a modified W to the corner, and then you start breaking out into new territory. You roll back over that stripe of paint you laid down, you pick it back up again, and then you go 1 more width. So with a fully loaded 1/2 inch Pro Doozy roller in a standard size bedroom, you should be able to do 3 widths top to bottom with a full thing of paint in that roller. So that's what we try to get. Now, when you get those 3 done, then we do finish strokes top to bottom. 1, 2, 3, just kind of to tip it off. Make sure everything's going to be even. This is a very, very good way to paint, and honestly, it should only take you about, if you're really trucking and you have good gear, it should take you 10 minutes or something to roll, average size bedroom. So yeah, technically, what you would call, or what I do is a W sort of pattern, but we don't, like they show you in HGTV, somebody walks right to the middle of the wall and they do a super exaggerated sort of W. That's fine, except you would never start in the middle of a wall, and if you do a super exaggerated W, you're really doing a wide space, when really, if you think about what you should be covering is 9 inches, 9 inches, 9 inches. Doesn't seem like a lot, but it ends up being, this. So 1 roller cover, you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this. It's about 4 or 5 widths, and you're done with the wall already. So, yeah. So, Grandpa Frank, I hope that helps you out there. And yeah, if you're watching the live feed, let me know. Thanks for writing in a question. Justin Orr from Kitchener, Ontario, one of my many Canadian viewers of the show. What's the best way to repair cracks in plaster walls that will hold up to time and shifting? Okay. Simple version, and then the super anal retentive version if you have unlimited time and money. Most plaster cracks are just cracks from expansion and contraction. Plaster is a cementitious thing, so it doesn't have a lot of give to it. So if the walls move, the wood walls of a house, especially in older houses that maybe aren't as insulated as well or have some moisture problems, the walls will move, the plaster won't with it, but a lot of times the plaster is still adhered to the lath. So you have a series of wood lath, wood strips put against the wall, and there's usually about a 1/2 inch or 5/8 of cement or plaster pushed into it, and the plaster actually goes through the lath and then mushrooms out, and that's called keying. So if you've ever seen the demolition of an old house, you can cut the plaster away, and the plaster comes out, and it actually expands out behind the lath there, and that keying action actually holds plaster to the wall. Most plaster is intact. When plaster is not intact, you can push on it, you can feel it springy, and you can feel where it hits the lath and then it bounces back out. In that case, you can either tear it all down and start over, or at least tear it down to something good and start over, or what you can do is re-adhere that loose stuff there. Now, I'll do the simple stuff first. The quickest trick that I found with hairline plaster cracks, the ones that open up, there's two kinds of cracks. There's ones that collide, like when the continents come together and they sort of push up the continental divides, and there's ones that move away from each other like this. These are the easy ones. You basically just fill them and they're fine. When the walls move again, it might push a little bit of that stuff out. You might see a tiny little ridge in there, but with seasonal movement, it'll go back down again. I have mostly the kind of cracks where I filled them in my house, in my 100-year-old plaster. Occasionally, if we get a super, super hot, humid summer, you might get a little swelling, and you can actually see a little ridge develop there. But, come the middle of winter right now, it's as dry as a bone out there. They'll start moving away, but they've never opened up. And they've never opened up because I use a vinyl spackle when I repair plaster cracks. A vinyl spackle compared to like a lightweight or a standard drywall mud. Drywall mud is very brittle. It's just chalk dust and gypsum, and there's just nothing to it. It's brittle. You can scratch it, you can etch it, stuff like that. Vinyl spackle actually has a little give to it. Now it's harder to sand and it takes a little longer to dry, a little harder to work with, but that little extra sponge or give is all you need when those cracks move like this, whereas a rigid drywall mud would move with it and actually crack or crumble or something. This vinyl, that's why I get those little ridges. It's actually trying to expel that vinyl spackle out of the wall. But because it's got sponge, it just sort of bends, gives a little, and then it kind of contracts and goes back down. So I've done whole farmhouse restorations inside where the cracks weren't bad. The walls may be a sanded finish, so you can't just take a putty knife and start, going over flat. The old plaster has a lot of really cool texture to it sometimes, and if you did a putty knife flat on it, you'd flatten out an area where the rest is a sand texture or something like that. So what I do is actually just take my finger, take my thumb, take my fingers, and you just rub a bunch of plaster in there, and you just massage it into the crack. And it takes a little while. The farmhouse I did a complete restoration on a bunch of years ago, every wall was in perfect condition except for hairline cracks. So it took me an entire day, top to bottom, every wall, every ceiling, every closet, every single bit of plaster in that house. I rubbed plaster into those cracks until I lost my fingerprints. And I actually visited that house about a year and a half ago, and only one of those cracks had opened up over the years. And now this is a vacation farmhouse, so it's brought down to about 45 or 50 degrees in the winter, semi-winterized, and then in the summer, sometimes it's air conditioned, sometimes it's just windows open. So this is sort of worst case scenario for plaster. And if you can imagine, there was probably 700 or 800 cracks in this house that I filled for one to open up. And of course it was outside corner of the house, outside wall, that side of the house was sort of, down on a hill, and that's probably where the most movement of the house is going to be. So couldn't have been more pleased with that job there. Everything was holding up perfect, years and years later. That's the easy part. If you have crumbling plaster, or if your plaster's kind of iffy, you can actually re-adhere that plaster to the wall. There's companies like Abitron and other things that make special kits or systems and chemicals. The gist of a lot of these things are, if you just take a drywall screw, try to zip it in there, you're going to crumble your plaster. What they actually do is they give you these kind of discs, these plastic discs that go along with the screws. You can actually zip those through there and catch some of the wood lath behind it, and that plastic disc will actually grab a whole bunch of the plaster and sort of distribute the force of that screw out over the area of maybe a Susan B. Anthony coin versus the head of a screw. So it has less chance to to sort of crumble the plaster and things like that. So the only problem with that is you have to sink them into the plaster a little bit. You might have to dig out little divots or bunkers for them. Some of them sit proud, and you're going to have to actually build up a large area of mud or plaster over it. But if you want to save the plaster, that's really the way to do it. Like I said, there's a bunch of chemicals, sort of two-part things, one-part things that you can get in there, and it'll sort of glue everything back together. An old trick I learned from a wallpaper is to take Guards, which is a clear sort of wallpaper primer. It's sort of got a little bit of, there's a whole bunch of, Guards is just one name of it, but it's basically a clear sort of wallpaper sizing or priming. And once you clean out all the plaster, you just brush a bunch of stuff of that in there, this clear stuff, and it'll actually stabilize everything, sort of glue it together. It's sort of membranous, a little bit flexible, a little bit rubbery, but clear. Seals everything, and then you can sort of start the plaster patching thing again. So if you have any specific plaster stuff, I actually just talked to another father-son team about they do church restorations, and they have a very interesting system of repairing plaster, unique products, their methods. They do large scale stuff, and I mix up small batches of plaster when I do church restorations and stuff, because normally I don't get called in to do a 6-month church restoration. I get called in to do a week or two restoration, a mild restoration. These guys are doing the gold leaf and the painting of the statues, and I corresponded with them, and they gave me a list of some really interesting products that I'm going to be experimenting with here. But the gist of it is, you can technically use drywall mud. If it's got texture, you're going to want to mix in a little sand or a little aggregate. You're not going to do anything bad. The purist will get very, very mad at you, but honestly, most farmhouses are messed with already. They're not pure. They're not survivors. They're not time capsules, from the 1920s. So, if you patch a little little plaster with drywall mud, it's not the end of the world. Well, you can always get plaster and mix it up yourself. It's a powder mix with water. It takes a lot of experimentation with that sort of thing. And if you don't have a lot of experience with working with drywall mud and other stuff, it can be kind of a learning curve, especially if you're mixing your own stuff. So technically, you're not doing anything wrong if you get some vinyl spackle to do the hairline cracks, or if you get some lightweight or all-purpose drywall mud and sort of put it in a bunch of layers and do that. But otherwise, as long as the plaster is keyed in, you just have to make sure that those cracks don't come back all the time. So if I would have done that farmhouse restoration with lightweight drywall mud, I would assume those 700 or 800 cracks, most of them probably would have came back, because there's absolutely no give with the lightweight or standard drywall mud. So, Justin, I hope that helps out. If you have any other questions, you just let me know. Scott Road of Onalaska, Wisconsin, he wrote, "We see a lot of ghosting this time of the year from candles. Could you discuss what causes it and the proper way to seal it and cover it with paint?" I've been seeing this less and less. I do see it every now and then. Most of the time, wherever the candle is, you see the kind of halo or ghosting on the ceiling, because that's sort of where the soot and the smoke congregate. Maybe 10 years ago, candles were sort of the rage or something, but you would see them all over the place. People would burn them ad nauseum. Big candles, tons of essential oils, fragrance oils, scents in them. So it's not just a pure beeswax sort of thing. They're heavily scented with oils and other fragrances, and it's a lot of that stuff, a lot of the stuff that's not the wax. The impurities that will actually, you see the smoke coming off these candles, you can actually see the black wisps of soot going up with it. If that's on your wall, the only thing you have to be careful for, whether it's tobacco smoke, pipe smoke, candle smoke, is these impurities, these sort of oils, are going to transfer into the soot, and you're going to have sort of an oily soot sort of thing. I've never ran into a job where any of the soot or smoke bled through, but they've all been sort of, general sort of, they weren't too bad. If you have a really dark spot on your ceiling, get some shellac primer, like Kills makes an Upshot. There's a whole bunch of sort of stain blocking primers in a spray can that you can just quick mist it and then repaint your ceiling. Those work perfectly. I've never had anything come through a bin primer, a shellac primer, an Upshot sort of thing like that. It's been phenomenal. So if there's something that you're really worried about, see if you can clean it first, remove any oily soot, and spray it with a little of that. I've had great luck with that. But I will tell you this, that when I've had homes where people are heavy candle burners, I've experimented with just taking standard flat white ceiling paint and going over. And honestly, as long as the stain doesn't bleed through, or as long as the dark is covered by the ceiling paint, I've never had the stuff bleed through. So, Scott, if you've had another experience with it, certainly let me know if you have any tricks to deal with it. But always sort of the nuclear option for interior stains on walls. Number one, make sure the stain isn't going to come back. If it's a water stain, make sure it's fixed. Candles are easy because you can just stop burning candles. Wash it and then just put a little bit of that Upshot, shellac primer. Just use something alcohol based. There's in spray cans, or in standard paint cans, you have your water-based primers, your oil-based primers, and sort of these alcohol primers. They're alcohol, sometimes they're called shellacs, sometimes they're called bin. Bin is a trade name from Zinsser. Very popular shellac primer. So use any of those, and those are sort of the nuclear option. They seal in odors because of their alcohol base. The water permeable and the oil permeable stains can't go through them. The oil actually makes a barrier that's impermeable to the water soluble sort of stains and odors. And bin is actually used for, there's a lot of fire restoration jobs where if a kitchen starts on fire, or if there's smoke damage in a house, a cleanup crew like Service Master will come in and clean it up, and then they'll actually prime the whole house with bin. It actually seals out the stains and the odors really well. They'll even do framing if your framing was charred, things like that. So, okay, let's scroll through here. I think I got everybody there. Let me scroll back through, see who's watching here. Joyce, thank you for your question. And Joyce wrote in about an actual possible paint defect a couple weeks ago, and I'll be curious, Joyce, whenever you get to painting that, let me know what your experience is with that. Tim shared the video. Thank you so much, Tim. I do appreciate it. Jamie, she just had a recent question. Thank you for your question, and thank you for watching. Lisa, a friend of mine there, thank you for watching. Derek, good to see you, my friend. Keith, sell those cars, Keith. Chad, thank you for watching, sir. Amy, thank you for watching as well. Tom from New Prague. Chad, key is to dry roll whole wall one end to the other. Gives nice even finish. Also keeps the sheen even. Let me know what you mean by dry roll. I'd be curious to see if your technique, if you caught the description of my technique, let me know how it differs from mine. I'm always interested if somebody's out there doing something interesting. Wes, my friendly Sherwin-Williams rep, thanks for watching, and thanks for the Graco sprayer. Wes, those tips came recently too that you were going to get me from Graco, so thank you for that. Art, I did some work on Art's house a little while back. He's got one of the nicer old homes in New Prague. With a procedure change for patching plaster cracks if the old plaster is put on directly over the old brick. That's an interesting one. Most of the time, plaster over brick, it sticks until it doesn't, and then basically you have to go through a lot of work to get something to stick to it again. Because they're both masonry surfaces, they are able to stick to each other, but a lot of it has to do with moisture and how the moisture is transferred. So a lot of times when I see masons or bricklayers or other stuff trying to join two masonry surfaces, they wet surfaces that are going to be joined only because one dry masonry surface will rob a wet. If you're applying wet plaster or wet cement over brick or something like that, the old brick will immediately start leaching that moisture out of there, sucking it out, and you will not get a good cure. The longer that that concrete, when somebody's pouring a driveway, stays open and is curing, the harder it gets. The longer the cure time, the better cure and more thorough cure it's going to get. So it's sort of the same idea with that. I would certainly, Art actually has a beautiful brick old home from the 1800s. If some of that plaster is coming off inside, I would certainly do a test. I would get some plaster mixed up. There's companies in one of my restoration magazines. I just saw a new ad for a company that does analysis of old masonry stuff. So you can send them in some mortar, a brick, or old plaster, and they can tell you the exact makeup of it and how to recreate it. So if you want to get insane, that's something you can do. But really, I would try out some general plaster mix. Any of the big sort of drywall companies, they have plaster stuff that they make as well. So I would check in with them, see what they recommend for a product. You'll probably have to work on the finish with them. If you have sort of a sand finish or a smooth finish, you may need to do a special mix for that, but do a test area. I would do if you have a volleyball size test area, I would do one portion of that test area with a small bit of mud mixed up, where you just put it on over the dry brick. I would do a test area where you actually wet down the bricks slightly and then see if one sticks better than the other, because you don't want to be adding a bunch of moisture in an old house if it doesn't help you. If both stick perfectly, I would proceed with just plaster over that. But you're going to want to put it in, most plaster, I would guess, is, I'm thinking about my own house and the houses I've worked on, 1/2 inch, 5/8, 3/4, somewhere in there, heavily dependent on who was putting it on. I've been in some houses where, I'm surprised the stuff stayed on the wall. It was so thick. It could have been approaching an inch. I've been in some houses where it's very, very light. You can actually see the ripple of the lath behind it. Like they should have maybe done a little more. So, I would do at least, what is called maybe a scratch coat. Put one coat on that's maybe got a little more aggregate, a little coarser. Put it about half the thickness. If you're dealing with a 1/2 inch to 5/8, put a 1/4 inch of that stuff on. Right before it dries, maybe score it a little bit, just so the new stuff can sort of key into it. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. You want to be light, but even just a pencil or a pen and make hash marks in it or something, just so you're not trying to stick the next layer of plaster to a smooth surface again. So I hope that helps, Art, and if you do experiment with that stuff, let me know. Oh, Steve Burnett. Good to see you watching. I've actually been listening to your podcast with Tom Reber. Very interesting to hear your story. Just wish you'd do it in longer chunks than 5 or 7 minutes. I'm interested to hear your story. So Tim is an old apprentice of mine, fellow paratrooper, and last night we were at a nice VFW meeting in town where a Vietnam vet kind of regaled us of stories of his time overseas and witnessing pet bears on Russian warships and tracking Soviet subs in Hawaii in the 70s and all sorts of fun stuff. So that was a good time, Tim, and thank you for sharing. Aaron Halloran, thank you for watching. And Carissa's the homeowner I'm working at today. So thanks for watching, and I will get back to work. I promise. I'm not going to do this all day. So the guys are hard at work at your house. I'm going to join them here. So thank you for watching, Carissa. And everybody, thank you for all your questions. If you have any other questions between now and next week's show, go to facebook.com/askapainter, start a new thread, leave some questions, and we will get to your stuff for next week. Thank you guys for all the questions here. I'm backlogged on mugs right now. My poor mug lady down in New Ulm is making them as fast as she can. I'm a thorn in her side because I get orders of 50 at a time, and she cranks those handmade mugs out as quick as she can. But like all other artist types, I try not to push her too much because you want to make sure those people do their good stuff. So, okay, well, thanks for everybody watching, and we will see you next week.